Hello and welcome to the Chicken Neck Podcast. Supported by the Idea Brews Network, we are a bunch of curious individuals based out of the Northeast, and we strive to bring you the best of policy discussions through the intersection with things that affect your and our daily lives. If you like what we do, show your support by sharing our work. Don't forget to leave your comments on this episode in our social media handles.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chicken Neck Podcast. Today we have the distinct honor of hosting Dr. Rubul Mout. He is a distinguished biotechnologist and esteemed scientist affiliated with the Harvard Medical School and the STEM Cell program at Boston's Children's Hospital. Hailing from Tinsukia, Assam, he earned his Ph.D. from University of Massachusetts and was a Washington Research Foundation Innovation Fellow at the Institute for Protein Design, University of Washington. Beyond research, Sir is also passionate about scientific outreach and has authored two Assamese books. And today, we'll talk about his journey from Northeast India to global scientific prominence and how it is truly inspiring. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much. This is my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we were trying to have this episode since a long time, and we are really happy that we finally had the opportunity to sit down with you and have the podcast. So, you've had a very interesting journey, and that is something that we want to start off the episode with. Can you share your insights into your upbringing in Assam, your journey, and what shaped your aspirations? Uh, and what challenges did you face during those periods, and how you overcame them?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, this has been a very, very long journey, and of course, if I start telling, it might have been another. As you know that I wrote a memoir, and one book is not enough to talk about everything. So it must, it would be like I don't know how many memoirs I have to fill up to tell to narrate my journey. But to just briefly touch upon the kind of growing that I had. I grew up in Tinsukia district in Assam, and of course Tinsukia district is quite big, but I grew up in an area called Kakopathar, which is quite far from Tinsukia actually, and Kakopathar also it borders Assam and Arunachal. So I actually grew up in a village that is at the at the border between Assam and Arunachal. It's very remote area and quite unreachable, from the rest of the world. And especially when I grew up, there was like not there wasn't transport system, or you could hardly get there. And of course, there are people who go there. And when I grew up, that area was also we had a lot of problems with the what the so-called the mainstream media call insurgency problem, and I grew up amidst all those problems, lack of education, and no better school system, and insurgency problems, and a lot of violence in those days. So the school actually I went to, the high school I went to, it was run by voluntary people. And so it's called Vansar School. I'm not sure if people know about Vansar School anymore, but what it is that it is run by some volunteers in the village, and these people don't get salary or anything, and just it's a tiny little hut where these volunteers teach, and these volunteers otherwise they are perfect farmers. They at the morning they do their farming, and by day they go to school and try to teach students, and that's what I started my high school. And because it was volunteer run school, and there had been no science education. How can you get a science teacher to go to an area like that, right? Because it is not a paid job. So I had to teach science myself, and same for mathematics and English, because in those areas, like I said, how can you get a teacher for those advanced subjects, right? So those subjects, we had a teacher for for English, but again the quality was very poor. And so these subjects, I had to self teach. And now looking back, obviously, there are, I mean, not obviously not everybody can come out from self-teaching mode, especially science. But I think for me the advantage was that because I was trying to learn things by myself, the entire high school science books. So I think that aided some advantage to me in later life, because I could learn things whatever I want. And so that's how I I you know I cleared, I completed my high school. And again, there is not much, my family or I was a good student, so I would do really well in schools. And so that was the motivation, and nothing, nothing beyond anything, because just that, I was a good student, I could do really well in school exams. So everybody thought I can do, I can go to college. And none of my family member actually went to college. And so I cleared my what we used to call, I'm not sure if that system is still there, but we used to call high school living certificate exams. And then I was the first one to get first division from that area. So then that's where the real aspiration began. And I went to college again, not a very fantastic college. I went to Tinsukia College, which is very unheard of. And so then again, I did really well in college. Then went to do my master's from Guwahati University. And so I think that's how I began. It's just like there's no clear cut ambition or path. It's just one step at a time. I did well in one exam, so okay, let's take the next one. And so I think that's how I began. And I think this has been really, looking back, sometimes obviously I'm even for me, I feel this is wow. But at the same time, I think there's less pressure in this kind of taking one step at a time, because you don't really know where you're going. And so you have really lost less like peer pressure, or like societal pressure. And because there is no, it's just you're doing for fun. It's just okay, let's do the next step, and things like that. So I think that's my beginning. And yeah, so I of course, like I said, if I have to elaborate on everything, so it'll go on and on. But I think just to that's yeah.
Yeah, so on that, I just wanted to ask you about it because I found it very relevant what you said about the towards the end, right? The fact that you were taking one step at a time, and we see that our generations, the ones below, or the younger ones, there's this inherent need to always, on a more philosophical way, that there's that overburdened by the pressure to be doing well. For you in your journey, you were always thinking about the next step for doing just a little bit better. I mean, so on that I have two questions. First is whether, like you said, did it make things much more convenient because you had less expectations from where you would end up in your journey, because of where you started from? And the second is, do you also believe that in your journey, at least, there have been a lot of lucky, not lucky, but convenient coincidences which put not just your, but in general with the people, because you are placed at one of the best institutes in the world, you're at Harvard. So do you see that around people's journey is often also dictated by this good incidents that happen around them? So
Yeah,
just
no, absolutely. I mean, for my case, I mean, obviously there are a lot of, what people call good luck, and it's just coincidence that things happen in the right place, right time, right? But I don't think that could be taken as a model of success, because not everybody is lucky enough to just be at the right place and right time and right thinking, right? So I think this is what I keep telling people, that the our system. I mean, a lot of people these days, I mean, they take my example. They said like, poverty is no burden, but that's not true. Poverty is still a burden. And this fact that we do not have a system wide um, approach to to solve this problem, I think that's dangerous. Because like I said, you can have one or two person coming out like this, but you can't really apply this to this entire system. And I give a very, I have a typical standard example for this. I tell people that in the forest there are, every tree would will have lots of seeds, right? And they all fall on the ground. But how many actually those seeds actually become a grown-up tree one day? It's very rare. It's only one or two. The fact that nobody takes care of those trees, nobody takes care of those, like whatever Um, so it is not possible to every seed to become a big tree. And I give the example in my childhood how once I took a valuable plant, and we had lots of seeds everywhere. Every year there are lots of plants growing, but like those will die anyway. So I once I took one, and then I replanted somewhere, and then that grew up. And so that's the thing. The fact that our system requires that systematic replanting of seeds, so that everybody grows up. And so I think, for my case, I mean, absolutely, it worked out, for multiple reasons. Maybe I don't want to call I had talent, but at least I had some obsession for particular things. Maybe I like science, and I was very obsessed about that. And then it's just that maybe I opened up my mind, and I just wanted to know what's beyond. Not everybody will do that, right? And so that is where we really need training, system-wide training for young generation. And this is where I think a lot of smaller communities, like marginal communities, are lacking, because we are often compared. That's why like some communities, like Bengalis, or like Jewish communities, are far ahead of other communities. And it's absolutely because of that system-wide training, and the aspiration for everybody to become something. And I think these are really needed. Again, like, going back to your main point, I mean, yes, it is true that I had less burden. I had less, I was sort of more, like I said, I took one step at a time. So I didn't have to think very far. So I was not depressed or anything. But I think at the same time, like I mentioned, I think we need some kind of attention. We need some kind of aspiration. So otherwise, I think it's not going to happen for everybody.
No, right, right. That's also, because this came from a very, sort of another talk that I was listening to, where I was they were speaking about how, regardless of what you want to be or where you want to be, it's always those factors that play in, right? Like you said, that of course it's not always about being in the right place at the right time, but also just the fact that you go there, give your 100%, and be present there, that plays such a significant role. And I mean, your journey itself is such a wonderful story to tell for all of our listeners who will tune in to listen to your story. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that answer.
On that note, since you've talked about your curiosity in science, with science, and how that led from one thing to the other and has taken you to where you are in terms of your academic work and research. So, before we talk about your experiences during your PhD and your subsequent academic experience, what were certain things that you did in terms of your academic career or academic journey that helped you, and you think are relevant for people who will be tuning in? Or because a lot of us, me included, we want to also develop those skills. So can you take us through how it eventually led to your current position?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I obviously, my science is my, the main thing. This is what I do, and I'm now destined to do science. But I think at the same time, science is only one part of the society, and you can approach both your own success and well-being, but also the well-being of the society can be approached from multiple angles. And I always find that the confluence of things that you can do, or the skills that you have developed over the years, that leads to sort of position yourself in a society, both for your own, like I said, own career, but also for the good of the society. And for me, that has been so I, again, like I said, I'm primarily a scientist, but I see science as a way to give back to the society, to not just like feed me, but also feed the society, right? And in doing so, there are other responsibilities that come up. It's not just like discovering something in the laboratory, but also like really what it means to the people, right? What it means to discover something, and how would that benefit the society. And so, thinking about that big picture, I have been doing things like not only science, but as you know that I have written 2 books, and I would love to write many books before I die. and And again, the goal is just not just like the same way that what I'm doing science and my approach is for other things also same. How is it going to benefit the society? How is it going to really help others, right? And that philosophy comes to me because I myself, or all of us, we are benefited by our ancestors, right? People have done tremendous great work, the human species. And we are living on that success, right? I mean, today, I'm sitting here in Boston, all of you are in India, and we are talking through some kind of devices, and this was unimaginable 200 200 years ago, right? I mean, and things like that. It's just for me, what I try to do is that I ask this question to myself, like, what are the skills I have? And over the years, what have I, like, trained myself? And then knowing the skills that I have, how can I use this to really help others? And for me, doing science is one line of things that I do. And then at the same time, I wrote and I want to write, and then also reach out to students, young students, and help them out, sort of build this, let them know what we can do. And many time in human civilization, it's that connection, that networking of human, that leads to greater good. And so I think that's my approach. Again, I love to be in the laboratory and discovering things, but at the same time, to make sure that discovery translate to something, that discovery translate to either to a knowledge, or it helps people. And to do that, I have to take writing and or talking, or whatever is needed. Yeah.
That sense of responsibility and that idea that your academic pursuits should also reflect in the real world which you're a part of and you are so involved in. Because so how did that work translate into reality? Like, can you tell us the way your research has impacted the lives that you wanted it to, and how your motivations were ultimately fulfilled through that?
Yeah, so there are two ways. One is that the direct implication, and there is a one indirect implication. And direct implication is that you discover something, or you build something that is going to change human health or something like that. So that's the direct way. Indirect way is that I'm in a position, and I do science, and science is the ultimate truth, right? I mean, if everything fails in society, science has to stand up, because, as you know, for anything that goes wrong in humanity, it's at the end of the day, there's a war, there's a outbreak in whatever, science has to stand up, right? So I think that indirectly it also helps young generation to think about taking a tough decision, that what should be a career and what should one do. And I think these professions are absolutely needed to uphold humanity. And so I think both, like I said, in a direct and indirect way. Direct way is that my own discoveries can make an impact. Indirect way, that's sending a strong message to young generation that we really need to think about science. And this has been even more important now, when we live in a time that everything, narratives are distorted. Everything is just going wrong. And I'm speaking politically. And like, I think there has been it has been more important now than before, to stick to basic truth, and to tell the young generation that we really need to care about this profession. And in terms of the direct way that I talked about, I do research in the field of over the years I have done a lot of stuff, but currently I work in sort of re-engineering our immune systems, our body immune system. And that is a huge thing, because it's only in last 20 years we have made significant progress in terms of re-engineering our immune system, and that has already led to tons of many ways of inventing new medicines, and that has already impacted the humanity in a tremendous way. I mean, just talking about cancer immunotherapy, for example. I mean, it has saved now millions of people by now, in just in last 20 years. So I think there is, and yet, a lot of our burdens, a lot of our suffering, it comes from diseases, right? I mean, the fact that a lot of countries like India cannot do well, because it's just the burden of health is so high, right? I mean, think about in your family, if somebody is sick for a very long time, what happens to the economic situation of your family? It really destroys, right? I mean, you have to go to the hospital and your savings, dry up. So the same thing happens to a country when the health burden is so high, and it's the country cannot do well. So I think those are some of the bigger the impact that I'm looking for through my own research. And again, science is built up on a lot of people's work. It's not just one person. I'm not trying to be like hero to save like 5 billion people single-handedly. That's not what we aspire to. We just want to contribute, and I think it's a collective contribution from many people like us. And so I think that's what we look for.
It's clearly evident that the motivations and the aspirations that you had when you started out your journey and the way you wanted to impact the world, you've clearly achieved it, and you continue to build on towards that. So, and we are also really glad that we got to hear a part of it. You've also talked about how you look at the world beyond science, and also when you mentioned about your journey, how you've written about it. So it's very interesting that you manage the dual roles of a scientist as well as being an author in your through your work, and you've also mentioned how you keep wanting to write more and more books. So how did you get into this idea of uh, writing down your experiences, and how do your roles as a scientist and an author intersect each other, if they do?
Yeah, no, I mean, frankly speaking, I want to be more of an author now because I want to write more, and there's always thoughts, right? And especially like I said, at a political climate when things are going wrong, and you really want to speak out. Unfortunately, I also had to spend a lot of hours doing experiment or supervising my trainees, and that takes away a huge amount of time. And in fact, last couple of years, I haven't been able to write anything significant because of that. It's just the amount of work that is required in science so much. But anyway, going back to your question, so I think it was not by choice again. It's just sometime like we discussed early, that things happen coincidentally. And I think for me, because in Assam, as you know that. If you grew up in Assam, some of the role models are always writers, right? I mean, we have very sort of very defined role models. Either somebody's writer, novelist, or someone is a film star, or someone is like that kind, right? So you have to fit in somewhere there, right? If you aspire a good career. So anyway, so I when I was in college or university, I also aspired to do something. And I read a great deal of literature, and I started Assamese, but later on obviously I read world literature. So I think that really interested me, and sometimes I want to tell people that I'm actually a storyteller. I'm not really a scientist. I just want to be a storyteller at sometime. But obviously, that's not the reality. But I think I always, like I said, I always aspired to be a storyteller, whatever the format is. It be it a written like book or whatever it is. So I think that kept growing, and so when I finished my masters, and then I was like trying at science. So I at the time I used to write for Assamese newspapers and magazines and kind of stuff like here and there. So that kept growing over the years. I also, like everybody else, I also wanted to write stories, and which also I did without any burden, without any criticism. I just did whatever I wanted. It's not just looking to what people are going to say or something like that, right? So I did that, and so I think that only helped. Again, like like I mentioned before, sometimes doing things in a very freestyle really helps, because that's a training ground, right? And I did that. I wrote stories, and nobody appreciated maybe, but I appreciated because I did it. And so that kept growing, and at some point, I had got enough training for writing as well, and I sort of knew how to tell a story. And I think that was a big part of my memoir. It did not come from nowhere. It came from somewhere, and that somewhere is that the fact that I was trying to tell stories, and I was trying to tell stories in a written form. And I practiced for almost 10 years before actually I wrote that memoir. So a lot of people think that, oh, this book came from nowhere. That we didn't know him, but I think it come from somewhere, and I think that is required. And the fact that telling a compelling story can really change the society. It can motivate people. It can do good in all different ways. So I still believe in that. So I still believe in the fact that there are good stories, and I think we can influence. We can take the society in a better way by telling good stories. And so that's where I stand in terms of telling stories. And then obviously science backs me up, because it helps me. It gives me the ingredient to tell stories, right? And it really helps me to think, what is the truth about. So I think it's just a kind of mixture of things that happen together. So
It's interesting to know that how you balance the world of science and literature, and that's no easy feat. Yet you manage to excel in both with such finesse. And it's also fascinating to know how your scientific precision and creative storytelling complement each other. And you try to make complex ideas, more accessible and inspiring. So in that note, you also, talking about how you are more into literature and, try to be identified more as an author or write many more books. So speaking of your journeys, your memoir that you were talking about, that is Moru Eta Xopun Ase. It captures your path from Assam to the University of Massachusetts. So can you just tell us what inspired you to pen this memoir?
yeah, so I was so the fact if I have to recall the stream of events that led to writing this book. So just I mentioned that in 2016, I believe, or 15 I believe, I published my first my story collection. Again, that was an insane idea. It's I even now stopped that book. I don't think it has any literature merit. But again, at the time, like I said, we all want to do something, right? So I wrote those stories, and I wanted those to be published as everybody else does. And so that was in 2015. And then in 2016, my father passed away because of Parkinson's, and which is, again, it's a I was very well aware the science behind Parkinson's, and I was not exactly working in that same field, but in a sort of a similar line, right? I was working with genome engineering and things like that. So when my father passed away, so I had a short visit back to Assam. And when I came back, it was actually, I was kind of possessed with these emotions, right? I mean, the fact that I come from, my roots go back to so far, and I had all these stories in my mind, right? I grew up, I knew that I had the whole plot and everything, right? And at the same time, charged with emotion, what I call people the possession of emotion, right? And so I came back, and I was like, this is a real story, and I got to write it, because I have written stories, fake stories before, and I was like, this is real, so I got to write it. So I still remember I came back March 38th, and then March, then a week later, I say in my notebook, I still recorded the date, April 8th. I started writing the book. It's just a week after I came back from home, because like I said, the memory was so fresh and so raw at the time, that and everything else, and then the emotion was so fresh, and so obviously, I had to do science as well at the time, but I was like, I'm just going to write this. And so I took about a month and a half or so, actually, to just write that book, and I did not do anything else during that time when I was writing, because it has the whole story. Like I said, the whole story was inside me. It was like almost how and I just wrote it, and then I didn't think about anything. I just, like, this is inside me. I just need to write it. And so I wrote it about a month and a half or so. I still had some sections to it later, but and so that's what. And I was not thinking anything else, just to write the story, and that's how this book became. Yeah.
No, that's truly fascinating to know. Actually, your memoir has truly resonated with readers across generations. So it has become one of the best-selling books, I believe, and that's inspiring not just to young minds, but individuals of all ages. In fact, my parents, grandparents, everyone in my family has read it, and we all found it deeply motivating. So your story of perseverance and ambition strikes a chord with so many. So in that line, I wanted to ask you whether could you share some of the most significant incidents from the book that played a pivotal role in shaping your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a few moments. I had this one liner or somewhere I mentioned that we had a lot of unforgettable, the moments that you cannot forget. But there are a few moments in your life that actually change your path, how you are taking. I mean, these are obviously very personal things, but still at that level, there are a few moments in your life it really changed. How what is your future going to be? And so for me, I think there are a few moments. One is definitely that the moment when I passed my SSLC exam, because from I mentioned I'm from a part of world that that every kid became farmer, right? And everybody was a farmer, and every kid would grow up to become a farmer, right? And there are hardly anybody who would cross that barrier. And for me, I didn't really know what is. I didn't have an imagination. I didn't really know what is it to be crossing that barrier, and I didn't know where it is going to lead me, right? And so I think getting first division in that SSLC exam at the time, and from my village, was, I think, it's a very very significant event in my life, and I think that changed everything. And because first that led me to go to a college, and nobody else did in my family or neither in our village. And then obviously the next step was waiting for me, and that it's only about, again, like putting yourself in that position and then explore what is there. And then after that, I think the next moment was again when I got a chance to study the masters, and that's because I did so well in college exams, and I was I think the second among everybody in the college. I was first class second position. So I think that again really opened up door for me. And then the final moment was when I went to Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in India. I think that really opened up everything, because before that I didn't really know what it is to do science, or I was just studying, right? I only learned science, but not knowing how to do science. I mean, doing science and knowing science is two different things. And so I think the moment of going to Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai was, I think, the was another big moment. And this moment I'm sharing for my own personal growth. But then there are moments that change your thinking process, the way you looked at the society. And in that regard, writing this memoir itself was it's a changing phenomena for me, actually, because there are a lot of things that I did not think about before. Well, I didn't think consciously, like about the society, about the responsibility of a person. But when I wrote this book, I was like, I did not know about this, or I didn't think about this before, and now I know who am I. Sort of like self discovery sometimes. And I think sometimes you need to go through that self discovery phase, and you need to really know who you are. And you might be thinking like, oh, I'm somebody, but like think deeper, then you find, no, you're not that person, you're actually somebody else. So I think there are a lot of moments in terms of both at a level of personal growth, but also the way you take the society, the way you think about the society, or the kind of stuff you can do, the responsibility and all these things. So I think there are I think many moments like that. Yeah.
All these movements that you're talking about in your journey, it truly highlights the resilience and determination needed to break barriers. It's incredible how your personal experiences shape one's path and inspire so many others to dream big. So, in terms of that, pursuing higher education, especially on an international platform, comes with its own set of challenges. So, what are some of the most significant obstacles that you faced while pursuing your higher education, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, there are many challenges, obviously, over times. And I mean, again, I take one at a time, and then see what I can do. So my number one challenge when around like when I finished college or university, and then trying to navigate through, was that I couldn't speak English because, like I said, I came from rural Assam, and nobody speaks English or nobody understands English, right? So I mean, no, I was no different. And like I said, my education, English education, science education, was almost self-taught. And so I didn't know how to speak English. So the first time actually when I finished my master's and went to Mumbai, I couldn't speak. I could speak Hindi because I never watched television, so we didn't have television at home. So I had a serious communication problem. And then when first time I came to United States again, I didn't understand anybody. I couldn't speak, and nobody understood me. That was a very, very challenging, hard time. But I still survived because like, what shame you you can have when you cannot speak. It's like, you put yourself at a corner and don't speak to anybody, right? But you still get the food, you still survive. So I was like, yeah, I survived. So I think I survived that way for about couple of years when I was in Mumbai. And then slowly I picked up the language. I did a lot of hard work in terms of reading English text, and reading newspapers, and then going to like English speaking classes. This is, now it sounds ridiculous to me because, like, wow, I went to English speaking classes in Mumbai. And so it's all because I was just trying to make myself better. And so it took a while to get there. Now, last week I was in Michigan. I told one person that, do you know that till the age 23 I could not speak a single sentence in English. That person looked at me and was like, wow. And so I think those are the challenges. I mean, of course, people now, it's hard for um, people to realize those, but I think those barriers. And then after coming here, even within science, so we come from nowhere, right? And we come from like a background that is absolutely, we basically we have no backgrounds, right? And we come from places that you have to build one step at a time. You can't just directly go. Nobody's going to, like, take you and try to teach everything, right? So you have to learn before you go anywhere. So for me, even in science, I mean, although I studied science in India, but like after coming here, this is a different country with different exposures and resources. So I had to build that again. So even to do science, it was very challenging, and I had to start somewhere and then really climb up one step at a time. And so looking back now, when I look back my PhD and now, and I see there's a huge, huge difference and what I was trying to achieve back then, and the kind of stuff I was learning, and what I do now. So I think it's a continuous journey. I think it's just, we, all of us, we have to learn things every day, otherwise it's going to be boring. And I think that's how we move on.
From that phase where you first went to start off your journey in the US, and how during your work, your PhD. So, can you take us through the experience of doing that course? And from someone who, obviously, you mentioned that you studied science in India and then you went on to do the same thing there. But you've talked about the difference in exposure, difference in experiences, and there must be definitely be different in the ways a similar subject or thing is taught in India. So when you went there and you experienced this, how did you come to get used to that type of a system, and what are things that you would pick up and implement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, within the science, actually, there is a whole spectrum of different levels of science, right? I mean, there are simple things that you learn. I always think about. Let's think this way, like within literature. Let's say you are reading Lokvinath Bezbura, for example, like Buriya Hadu, those kind of who everybody can read, right? And the other spectrum, let's say you are thinking about somebody like Orhan Pamuk, or somebody like Virginia Woolf, or something. You can see that, right? There's a whole spectrum of like the narrative and things like that. So same thing happens in science. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of things, and you got to begin somewhere. You have to first read Buriya Hadu before many years later you can read Virginia Woolf, for example. And so I think in science, obviously coming from India, you don't get a lot of exposure. And yeah, I came to United States. But within the United States, again, there is the spectrum of science, the different levels of science that happen. So I went to University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and the kind of work I did was kind of okay, but not at the top level, not at the like the frontiers of science that there's nothing beyond that kind of. So it was kind of okay level, and so I developed key skills there. I tackled some science problems, small problems, not really very resourceful. So it's still not considered as the frontiers of science. And then so I did that for a couple of years. I picked up the skills, and the how you do science and things like that, with a lot of challenges, obviously. And then from there on, actually, then when I finished my PhD, I was I was looking for I was looking to upgrade myself. I used this iPhone 2 version. Now I need to upgrade to iPhone 3, right? And so I was trying to upgrade myself, and that was again very struggling period, because it is very difficult to upgrade yourself, because it's not only about what you want to do, it's about what other people are thinking about you, right? So you have to tell convincingly that you are capable of doing things, right? And so it's very hard. So I just a few days ago, I told somebody that after I finished my PhD, I applied to almost 35 places to really get into, like, upgrade myself to the next level. And look, I did a PhD from UMass Amherst, and yet I was struggling to move to the next level, right? I interviewed at Harvard, at MIT, and all different places, UC Berkeley, and all. But a lot of people are not ready to take me. They're not ready to give me opportunity, and so I struggle. I like I said, I applied to almost 35 positions, and finally I got to a place that I was really satisfied, and so that was at University of Washington. Sometimes you don't go by only university ranking, you have to look for the quality work. And so I went to University of Washington because of that quality of work. And a lot of, at the time, I had offers from MIT and UC Berkeley. People are asking why you were going to University of Washington, and shutting down this MIT offer. So I was like, it's just the quality is so high. And I made a very right decision. I went to work with David Baker, who got the Nobel Prize this year, by the way. And that's the kind of, you have to upgrade yourself, and there are a lot of challenges to do that. But I think one is to, obviously there are a lot of sleepless nights that in the process. But I think it's just that's how it is. And so I have been constantly sort of trying to upgrade myself. Then after University of Washington, then I moved back to Harvard. And even here, I'm doing things that next step, next level harder, right? Even the kind of stuff that I work with David, and that itself is very top, and that's why he got the Nobel Prize this year, right? But I'm thinking even beyond that now. Like, what are bigger challenges that I can actually tackle with my kind of skills? And so I think I'm constantly looking for what is the next challenge, and what is the bigger. It's not easy. There are a lot of like sad moments. It's very difficult, I must say that. And also it comes with you lose a lot of personal things, like if you have a family, sometimes you have to sacrifice time. And then also in this business, you don't earn a lot of money. People have aspiration to become wealthy and things, like you have to sacrifice all those things. So it's hard, but I think at the end of the day, I'm looking forward for something that I enjoy, and I feel like I'm satisfied doing. So
Do you feel that it's always the purpose that drives you? It's the larger purpose that keeps driving you to strive so hard every time
I mean,
you go somewhere.
yeah, I think for me, I talk to my family very clearly about this, my priorities. We had, with my wife, we had this discussion for, very long time, almost for 2 years. We keep talking about this. I always told my family that, look, this is what I want to do. And we are not, we are still we are doing okay in terms of, as a family, not the best family time we get, not the best kind of, resources that we have in our family. But I always tell, like, this is something I want to do, and I think this is the only way I can be happy. And I think that doing really hard science, really doing stuff that can change the face of humanity. Again, when I say change of humanity, I'm not only talking about myself. It's just part of a bigger community. But I think just being able to be there and doing those stuff, sometimes it is kind of rewarding in a sense that you do not feel like I'm there's all these feelings, right? You always keep thinking maybe I'm not doing the right thing, or maybe I'm not so I think getting access to those resources where you can do things is a very big part of career thing. I mean, yeah. So yeah. So I mean, there are challenges, but I think it's rewarding at the end of the day.
I think this is one thing, being like you mentioned earlier, being at the right place, but also acknowledging the kind of resources like you mentioned and using it in a way which through which you can drive change to the society is
Absolutely.
right. So
Ab-
it's something through this conversation, we have been able to gauge that. I think you are driven by that intent to create change around you for the betterment of humanity. It's such a interesting, I mean, aspect of
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. I have been recently. Again, this keeps changing. Like I said, every day there is a new thing that comes to your mind. One of the thing I'm very fascinated by, very recent. Recently, I'm trying to do certain things, and I'm very fascinated by certain things. I mean, of course, I've done a lot of things in science, but one of the problem I'm seeing is that, humans are living longer, right? And the average lifespan used to be about like 50 years ago. Now humans live at least 80 years, and it's extending, right? And almost every grandpa and grandmother, they're living to 100 years, right? So but human never used to live like that. And but with that, again, that's great. We are living longer, we want to live longer, but with that there are a lot of problems coming. Our body doesn't we are trying to drag our body, but the body doesn't respond. Our immune system go weak. They can't really support us to go beyond certain limits, right? And that brings a lot of economic burden to the society, to the country. I've been thinking some problems at the fundamental level, not at the economic or societal level. How can you re-engineer the immune system to be really strong even at the old age, right? What I call immune rejuvenation. What kind of understanding we have, and with all these modern technologies, what can I do? So I have been thinking in that line, and maybe next work I want to do maybe in those lines, really take the next step and really hard stuff that can make an impact. So
Right. Considering that the conversation really gives away the fact that you think deeply about a lot of stuff. You talked about the memoir that you wrote as well. One question I had with the memoir was when I was initially searching about it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's written in Assamese, and I don't really know exactly the number of translations that has happened. But the fact that you are somebody who is staying in the United States, you are of course speaking English in a much to a larger audience now. Why is it that you chose to write it in Assamese? That's a question I have consistently had, when I was reading or when we were discussing you. Could you shed a little
yeah.
bit of light about that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is, this is maybe I'm not sure how appropriate I'm a person to speak about literature, but perhaps that when it comes to literature, it's not just a language. It's a whole different thing. It's yourself, right? Your inner whatever, like every tiny bits of things, right? I mean, and to talk about Assam, to talk about growing up in Assam, in a disadvantaged Assam. So I think the most appropriate thing was to use the language that I grew up with, and so because so that I can express myself in every possible place. And I think English would be very limited in that sense, because I had to invent words for things that I think no translation exists. And so I think that was one thing. And then that was what I was mostly comfortable at. Like I said, I wanted to tell a compelling narrative, and that narrative has to do with those ingredients, like the raw ingredients that you grew up. And I think I always tell people that to tell a story is not an easy job. And the language bears the burden of the whole narrative. And I think language is such an important aspect of telling a story. I mean, of course, now I learned science in English. I can tell science stories only in English. I won't be able to speak in my language, because that's what I grew up. That's the environment was, right? And in a similar way, to tell my upbringing, I think the Assamese was the most appropriate language to use. And of course, I asked the same question that you are asking now. Like there's a moment I was asking myself, should I write in English or should I write in Assamese? So I just took Assamese as a natural language because, again, like I said, everything happened in Assamese, right? But after writing in Assamese, there are a lot of people who approached me to sort of, like within a couple of days that people started emailing me. By now, I think I got close to 25 emails who wanted to write in English. And I said, no, I'm going to do this because I'm the, this is a narrative that, I built, and I think I will do it. So I actually did write this in English, I think 2019 or 2021. However, I got so busy in science, I just did not have time. One of my friend who is you guys might know him, Aruni Kashyap, who is also here at Harvard right now. I mean, every week he keeps asking me, "What happened to your book? Where are you right now?" So I'm very tired now telling him that I'm so busy doing science, and so I will, again, I'll get back to writing. But I think at
You
this
know,
moment,
yeah,
yes.
it's a world colliding from the barriers of the geography, because Arunida was one of the first people we interviewed when we
Oh,
started.
I see.
And I think the this is probably with you. This is the second episode we are doing where we are talking about a person's literary work from the perspective of lived experiences, because the first one was Arunida.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
so we know that he's in Harvard, so it's great to see two literary minds from Assam sit there. One, of course, a scientific one as well. Sit there and discuss the interesting work.
Yeah,
But
we
we also, yeah,
Yeah, we are
sorry.
very good friends, and actually, I've been in Boston for a while. So when he moved first day, I went to pick him up, and then I put him into his apartment and brought all the Indian groceries and things like that. And then every occasion we celebrate at our home. Mag Bihu we celebrate here in our apartment because so yeah, we are very close and good friends. Yeah.
No, much like him, I think we'll keep persisting on for you to on your work. And one last question we had before we let you go, which is sort of like a breakdown of two questions. First is what future projects. Of course, we know your intent to do more scientific work, but do you also have some literary projects in mind? If what, would you like to share it with our listeners?
Yeah.
And on that also. We sort of wanted to also have pick your head, because you are somebody whose journey, I mean, I'm sure when you wrote the memoir, you realized that it's a journey, like you said, it's not everybody can end up being where you are, right? It's a journey very, you'd be great. There's a lot of gratitude, we understand, but it's also a journey that seems to be one of example. So, in that note, for the generations that are growing up today, not necessarily the more privileged one, but also people who are fighting against all odds, what advice would you have for them? To our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are young people. So
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, absolutely. To answer your first questions. I mean, of course, I mentioned few of my science ambitions. I want to continue doing great science, whatever possible. I mean, obviously, sometimes we are limited by resources. For example, right now the current president is trying to cut off all the resources, and so we struggle a lot in that regard. Um, but beyond science, in the writing scope, I'm hoping that I can free up a little bit more from science in the future, and then really sit down and write in a more regular way. I did. There is a time actually I did want to write a follow up of my this memoir, because it abruptly ended at a sudden moment, and everybody's asking for my what is next. I did want to write. Actually, I sat down to write. I think about 2 years ago, and this time I thought, okay, this time I'll start in English, because the whole of this story happened in English. Because this is after I moved to United States, right? So everything happened in English. It didn't happen in Assamese. So I started writing. I put down some 10,000 words, and I was like, wow, I'm done one tenth of or one fifth of my memoir. But then again, got super busy with work, and just I right now I do not have the bandwidth to think about creative writing. It's just so insanely busy sometimes. But again, like I said, I am looking forward to. But as you grow older, you also grow a little wiser, right? You have like wisdoms and things like that. So I think I want to use that space to some of the things that I learned from the society, from both at the top level, but also at the mass level. What people think, because I have access to both, right? I have seen the world at the top view. I have seen at the bottom, right? I every time I go back to Assam or talk to people, I encounter all these the thoughts and the problems and the societal level, everything, right? So I think it'll be that kind of the integration of science as well, the societal aspects, and which infused with a lot of personal stories and things like that. I mean, there's so many things one can write as long as you know that you are a thought leader in that space. So yeah, there are a lot of scopes to write. It's just finding time. So that's your to answer your first question. So I actually this is very interesting. I also had this conversation with Aruni last month. Both Aruni and I, we mentor quite a lot of students actually. We mentor from Assam, not necessarily from Assam, from anywhere. Um, this is one of the things I always I was telling that sometimes I'm a bit frustrated is that the fact that a lot of young students are looking for shortcuts and like right, like a single flight to, let's say, get from Dibrugarh to New York or something. That's what people are looking for. And I feel like that's a dangerous path, because like anything that is easy is not going to be sustained. It's not going to be very long lasting. And all I advise to young students, and this is what I have been telling everybody, is that we need to spend time. We need to spend some hours to build a successful career or life or whatever. And that is not going to be like just next day somebody won a kon banega crorepati, one whatever, 1 crore rupees. It takes time, and I always tell students that don't think too far. Just take one step at a time, and just keep be driven. Just keep going. Don't just stop. And I think that is very important, because like if you start imagining very big your day one, it's most likely you won't be able to achieve that, because then you're constantly trying to look for a shortcut to get there, right? And so I think the main key is that you take one step at a time. And I always tell people this stepwise approach, then taking a shortcut. And I think that, because then you learn everything, and you, at the end of the day, it's that the narrative you build, right? It's that the feelings, the process, the, and enjoying that process. It's not just like the ultimate, like I'm this, I'm the whatever, right? I mean, that takes so much of the, you have to go through a long process for everything. So I think everybody can be where they want, as long as they go through that process, rather than trying to look for a very shortcut and things like. So I think for all the young, and this is what, like I said, I sometimes I'm a little frustrated by a lot of students that I talk to. They always look for a shortcut, and it's like, I want to do this. And when I tell the truth that this is going to be long path, a lot of students get they're not motivated anymore. It's like, okay, I'm not doing this because this is going to take very long. So this is funny enough that when I still remember when I was a master student, people would say, PhD is 7 years. I'm not doing PhD. This is like outrageously long, and life is so boring. And now I tell people, like, where are you going? You can't escape from. Doesn't matter you do PhD or do something. There's no escape from life, and you have to just live with it, and you have to just do it. And so I think that's my take on that's what I want to tell young students.
No, thank you actually for the piece of advice. Even I noted it down. The fact that you said it's a longer journey, and the fact that you should not be taking shortcuts, and the entire interview, for me, it sums it up. The fact that you looked at every step as its own, rather than looking at the journey, because so many of us, I think even I have been at points guilty of looking at life only for this as a end, means to an end, where I would like to be at the end of it. And it's so many times that doesn't end up being how it is. But on that note, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We really look forward. There's so much to unpack about you. I am sure at some other point we'll have another episode on just pure science and your research, whenever you find the convenience and the time. But thank you so much for doing it. It has been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And I'm really it's been my pleasure.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Chicken Neck podcast, check out our other episodes available across all major streaming platforms and help us grow by spreading the word.
And for more updates, do follow us on our social media handles.